In this module, we will explore the psychology of human development. I think you all will really enjoy this module and be able to identify with a lot of it. So let's review again, what is psychology? Psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. And if you look at this picture, you can see the continuum of human development from infancy to old age. This module will examine human development and also key principles of learning and behavioral conditioning. What's interesting is this module really covers what might seem like two kind of separate subjects, but what I want you to think about is our physical development growing from infancy to old age, and also our learning, our mental and cognitive development do go hand in hand. First of all, I have this picture of what is known as human embryogenesis. So think of the word Genesis, think of the Bible, the beginning. This is what the beginning of life looks like. And you can see the first is fertilization, and it goes all the way to the amniotic sac starting to form and be enlarged. And this is all in the first 23 days. Very amazing. Definitely the miracle of life. I could have pulled up a picture of fetal development of a human, but we've all seen that a lot. So I thought it would be neat to bring in an example from the animal kingdom, and you can see from the lower left hand up through the top the development of that baby elephant and the details. One thing I want to say, I know a lot of us, myself included, don't really like to talk about unborn babies and use the word fetus. That is the scientific term, but just keep in mind I'll probably use them interchangeably. But like a lot of you, my preference is unborn baby rather than the word fetus, given a lot of our sensibilities and beliefs in the beginning of life. Here's a picture of an intact human embryo at 8 weeks gestational age found in a ruptured ectopic pregnancy case. So never fear, this is not an example of an abortion or anything like that. Instead, it's from an ectopic pregnancy, but it is, being that it's intact, is a rather rare thing to see the development up front. And that's 8 weeks gestational age. Like, you can start to see the little fingers and toes and the eyes and some of those organs. Just amazing miracle. Development, which is what one of the main things this module is looking at, refers to the physiological, behavioral, cognitive, and social changes that occur throughout human life, which are guided by both genetic predispositions, sometimes that's referred to as nature, and by environmental influences, so that's nature versus nurture. The nature versus nurture debate will be talked about, we'll talk about it later on in this course. You also explore developmental models posed by theoreticians such as Erik Erikson, and Piaget. And when I was working on my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's degree, I took an entire course on development, and one of the things we focused on was Erik Erikson, and we read the book The Color Purple and showed how Seeley, the main character in The Color Purple, went through the stages of Erikson's development, psychosocial development. So very cool. Learning, another focus of this module, is the relatively permanent change in knowledge or behavior that is the result of experience. And one of my doctoral professors interchanges the word experience with practice. So learning is the relatively permanent change in knowledge or behavior that is the result of experience. And for behaviorists, the fundamental aspect of learning is the process of conditioning. People who believe we learn through behaving, through practice. The conditioning is the ability to connect stimuli, which stimuli are the changes that occur in the environment, with responses, behaviors or other actions. So let's look at some examples. Look at this comic. It says, watch Watch what I can make Pavlov. Pavlov's the famous behaviorist. Watch what I can make Pavlov do, says the dog. As soon as I drool, he'll smile and write in his little book. I'll expand upon that shortly. But classical conditioning, which is a specific subset of conditioning that you need to be aware of, refers to learning that occurs when a neutral stimulus, such as a tone or the ringing of a bell, becomes associated with a stimulus, such as food, that naturally produces a behavior. After the association is learned, the previously neutral stimulus is sufficient to produce the behavior. So in Pavlov's case, you see he's holding a bell. He found that the presentation of food by itself would cause the dog to drool. And a lot of us, it'll cause our mouths to water. But with continuing pairings of the food with the bell, which was a neutral stimulus, the bell by itself didn't cause the dog to drool. And then eventually, just using the bell, the dog would drool because he came to associate, and you see the word association down here, associate the bell with eating. That's what is known as classical conditioning. Operant conditioning is different. On the other hand, it's learning that occurs based on the consequences of a behavior that can involve the learning of new actions. So this box that this rat is in is known as a Skinner box. B.F. Skinner is another famous behaviorist who the chapter talks about him quite a bit. But basically, various animals in famous studies, such as rats and also pigeons, were taught that if they pressed a lever or if they heard a sound or saw the flash of a light and then in response to it pushed a lever, they would receive a food pellet. And there are various degrees of behavior that these animals were trained to do with those reinforcers, with the food. So for example, one of my favorite examples, one of the science museums, kind of like one of those living science centers that a lot of us have attended and gone to as children, in Columbus, Ohio, closer to where I'm from, had a group of rats who would receive food pellets, and they were trained, their behavior was shaped to where they could play basketball against each other. And there was a large cage, and they would go back and forth, and they would take a little ball and put it in a basket. So that was this general Skinner box operant conditioning was used, the consequences of receiving food for, having certain actions such as putting that ball in the hoop is an example of operant conditioning. This is somewhat of a shorter video, but as you read, I hope this sets up the content so it makes more sense to you and is real. It's really interesting how our behaviors are conditioned. And it's so funny. One of the examples of classical conditioning I think of is our phones have conditioned us, when almost like the food caused the dog to drool, and that was a natural consequence. Now we've had cell phones in our life so long that we hear a ring and we automatically grab for our phone. It's become a natural, unconditioned stimulus. Well, then what happens is we're out and about and we hear a certain piece of music or a certain beep, and everybody automatically grabs for their pocket or their purse because they've come to associate that similar stimuli with their phones, just like the dog associated the bell with eating. So look around you, try to identify ways that conditioning is occurring in your life, the lives of your children, etc., and enjoy this module. Thanks, guys.